In the deepest, darkest part of Blackwood Forest, there's a place where the trees whisper secrets best left unheard. A place where compasses spin wildly, completely lost, unable to offer any guidance to those who dare to enter. And it's here in this cursed woodland that people simply vanish without a trace. What I'm about to tell you happened over 20 years ago, but even now, the locals refuse to speak of it. That is until now. For many years after that fateful day in the woods, the police received calls from all across the country. People describing how they could hear their name being called out in the dead of night, only to find that when morning came, no one else had heard a thing. These stories spread like wildfire, and soon enough, the whole town was up in arms about the mysterious goings-on within the forest. It was said that anyone who entered the woods would never come back out the same. Some would emerge with vacant stares, babbling incoherently about things that made no sense whatsoever. Others would simply disappear and leave behind nothing but an eerie silence. No trace of them ever found. The bravest, or perhaps most foolish, of souls decided to venture in themselves to uncover the truth behind these terrifying tales, but none ever returned. The forest had claimed them as its own. Now, I don't normally share stories like this, but given the amount of detail that went into this one, I couldn't resist. So let's delve deep into the woods and explore the disturbing occurrences that have made it one of the most haunted places on Earth. Before we begin, though, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss a spooky story. Also, stick around until the end for some extra lore about the Blackwood Forest and what exactly happens to those who get lost inside. The air grew colder as the three friends ventured deeper into Blackwood Forest. The thick canopy above them blocked out the sun, plunging the woods into an eternal state of twilight. Every step they took sent a shiver down their spines as the trees seemed to lean in, their branches forming a macabre archway over their heads. As they continued on, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. For hours, they had been walking without speaking, the heavy silence pressing down on them like a physical weight. But now, as the forest grew darker and more menacing, they began to question why they had come here. They had been warned about this place. How many times had they been told to stay away from these cursed woods? Yet somehow they had convinced themselves that it was just an old wives' tale, a story used to scare children and keep them away from the forest. But now they weren't so sure. Just then, Mark stopped in his tracks, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Did you guys see that?" he whispered urgently. "I thought I saw a tree move." His two friends, Jake and Jess, exchanged uneasy glances. They hadn't noticed anything, but they didn't want to dismiss his concerns either. The forest was unfathomably creepy, and it was easy to imagine things here. But still, they pressed on. They walked past gnarled trunks, twisted into unnatural shapes, their roots snaking across the ground like grasping claws. The air grew colder, damp and heavy with the smell of decay. Then suddenly they heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the very depths of the woods. It sent shivers down their spines, and they froze, listening intently. But when they turned to look, they saw nothing but an endless sea of trees. As they journeyed further, the path ahead grew dimmer and dimmer, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Just when they thought it couldn't get any worse, they heard their names being called out, not by voices they recognized, but by whispers that seemed to slither through the trees. At first, they tried to ignore it, attributing the whispers to their frayed nerves. But as the forest grew darker and more menacing, they realized that they were in grave danger. They needed to get out of there, and fast. The forest was alive, and it wanted them as its prey. They quickened their pace, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they struggled to make sense of the shadows dancing before their eyes. Fear propelled them forward. They ran blindly, desperately seeking the safety of the edge of the woods. Then, through the tangle of branches, they saw it, a faint glimmer of light that promised salvation. With renewed hope, they surged forward, pushing aside the undergrowth and stumbling out of the forest, collapsing onto the soft grass beyond. They had escaped the clutches of Blackwood Forest, or so they thought. Back at the edge of the forest, safe from the whispering trees, Mark, Jake, and Jess recounted the horrors they had witnessed. The more they spoke, the more they realized that what they had experienced was beyond comprehension. They had seen things that defied explanation, heard whispers that chilled them to the bone. But then something happened that made their blood run cold. One of them, Jess, looked at the other two and asked, "Do you remember our names?" Her voice trembled, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean?" Mark replied, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Of course I remember your name. You're my best friend. Why wouldn't I?" He paused, realizing that something was amiss. "Wait, do you remember mine?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Jake looked at him, his expression blank. "Who are you talking about?" he said, his voice devoid of recognition. Mark and Jess stared at each other in disbelief. Had they known each other their entire lives? They searched Jake's face for any sign of familiarity, but all they saw was a stranger. The forest had taken something from him, erased parts of his memory, leaving him a shell of his former self. Panic surged through Mark. If the forest could do this to Jake, what would stop it from doing the same to him or Jess? With newfound urgency, they decided to seek help. Perhaps the authorities might have some answers, some way to reverse what had happened to their friend. As they made their way back to civilization, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the forest was reaching out, trying to pull them back into its dark embrace. But they pushed on, determined to save Jake and uncover the secrets of the forest. Now, let me tell you about the time Sarah and Ben got trapped in the woods. It happened just last month. See, they were backpacking through Blackwood Forest, trying to make it to the other side before nightfall. But they underestimated the forest. It twisted and turned on itself. Every time they thought they were close to the edge, they'd find themselves right back where they started. And then there were the voices. Oh God, the voices. They said they were getting closer, like the forest was trying to lure them in. And then Sarah tripped. She fell and scraped her knee, and the blood just wouldn't stop coming out. Ben tried to help her, but his hands, they just passed right through her like she wasn't even there. When the paramedics finally reached Sarah, they found Ben kneeling beside her, his face pale and lifeless. He told them he'd been there for hours, that Sarah had fallen, and he couldn't get her to respond. But when the paramedics turned to help Sarah up, she wasn't there. She had vanished, leaving behind only a faint echo of her screams. You see, Blackwood Forest doesn't just take your memories. Sometimes it takes your loved ones too. And what's even scarier is that if you aren't careful, it just might take you next. The forest is filled with ancient spirits that feed off human emotion, especially fear. They use your worst memories against you, twisting them into horrifying images that haunt your every waking moment. There are also creatures that dwell in the deepest, darkest parts of the woods, drawn to the sound of human voices. Some say they've seen shadowy figures lurking at the edge of their vision, while others claim to have felt a cold touch on their shoulder, a breath on the back of their neck. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Blackwood Forest is its ability to trap those who enter. It's like a spiderweb spun from nightmares, ensnaring unsuspecting victims and holding them captive forever. Those who try to escape find themselves lost in an endless labyrinth of trees, unable to find the exit no matter how hard they try. And then when they give up, the forest claims them as its own, adding another layer to its dark tapestry. Blackwood Forest is a place where the veil between the living and the dead is thinnest, where the whispers of the past mingle with the cries of the damned. It's a place where reality itself seems to warp and twist, leaving those who enter forever changed. Or maybe it's just a scary story meant to keep people away from the woods. But if that's the case, why does it feel so real? Why does the fear linger long after you've left the forest? Why do the whispers in the trees seem to call out your name, beckoning you to return? Before you go, I need you to do two things. First, like this video. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Now, close your eyes and imagine this. You're camping out in the woods. The fire has died down, and the only sound is the wind rustling through the trees. Suddenly, you hear a noise. Something is scratching at the tent, trying to get in. What do you do? Let me know in the comments below.